Judicial nominees. What we're learning about President Joe Biden's first attempt to reform the courts. Coronavirus crisis. Why one country is restricting the AstraZeneca vaccine. Fallen officer. Mourners gather at a Catholic mass to remember a local hero. And going beyond Easter. How you can seek holiness throughout the year. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, March 30th, 2021. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm Eric Rosales in for Tracy Sable. Well, President Joe Biden announces his first slate of judicial picks. On the list, 9 women and 2 men, including Black, Muslim, and Asian American nominees. They would serve on influential federal courts and for the D.C. Superior Court. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen.
Eric, President Joe Biden calls it a trailblazing slate of nominees, but it would be up to a divided Senate to confirm them. On President Joe Biden's list of judicial nominees, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson for the U.S. Court of Appeals D.C. Circuit. She'd fill the seat Merrick Garland, the current Attorney General, used to occupy. And down the road, if a Supreme Court seat opens up during President Biden's term, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson could be tapped.
To nominate an African-American woman to the Supreme Court? Yes, absolutely. It certainly is.
The White House emphasized the diversity of the candidates.
It includes 4 nominees who have served as public defenders, 4 who are members of the AAPI community, a nominee who, if confirmed, would be the first Muslim American federal judge in history.
Former President Donald Trump nominated more than 200 judges during his time in office, including 3 Supreme Court justices. Defenders of the unborn and religious liberties praised his picks. The former president, First Lady, just launched a new website to stay in touch with the public. It says, President Trump knows that as long as we remain faithful to our citizens, our country, and our God, that America's best days are yet to come. Meanwhile, the Biden administration announces a new push to protect Asian Americans. This after an Asian American woman was attacked in New York City, 65 years old, repeatedly kicked. The attacker just walked away. President Biden tweeting today, these attacks are wrong, un-American, and must stop. And while announcing an extension of the payroll protection program this afternoon,
without somebody signing this bill today, there are hundreds of thousands of people who could lose their jobs and small family businesses that might close forever.
By the way, that Paycheck Protection Program is extended for 2 more months. And meanwhile, the president heads to Pittsburgh tomorrow to push his multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure plan. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Right, thank you, Owen. Well, joining us now to discuss President Biden's list of judicial nominees is Carrie Severino, president of the Judicial Crisis Network. Carrie, welcome back.
Great to be here.
Well, what are your initial thoughts about this list?
Well, my concerns about this list are it looks to me like this is the beginning in the judicial front of payback for the liberal dark money that helped put President Biden in office. There were over $100 million spent by liberal dark money groups to help get him elected. And now what we're seeing is a lot of those groups asking for judges to be put on the court that would advance those objectives. And so this is sort of the front line of watching that payback in progress. And it's interesting, to see some of the way that his nominees are being pushed very far to the left by some of those interest groups. Judge Jackson, for example, who's gotten a lot of press today, is someone who in the DC District Court has been overruled numerous times by the DC Circuit, including by some of the most liberal judges on that bench, and is someone who is far to the left. It's concerning to me to see that kind of influence on the federal judiciary rather than focusing on judges who are going to simply be applying the law as it's written.
And Carrie, which of these judges is considered the front runner should a spot open up on the Supreme Court?
Well, you've definitely heard a lot of people talking about Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson even before she was elevated to the D.C. Circuit or nominated to that position. Unfortunately, I think what we're hearing is a lot of discussion being talked about simply praising the racial diversity of the nominees, which is something certainly to be applauded. But I think the people who are making these arguments, it's coming from the same people who attacked Justice Clarence Thomas, for example, in what he called a high-tech lynching. It's the kind of people who blocked D.C. Circuit Judge Janice Rogers Brown, an outstanding Black woman, and filibustered her a nomination, who attacked Naomi Rao, an Indian-American woman who's on the D.C. Circuit now, and refused to vote for her. So those claims kind of ring very hollow. I think what we're seeing is people who are not actually, at the end of the day, interested in just diversity for diversity's sake. They really want people who are going to advance a particular partisan agenda.
Sure, it's all about the agenda. And is there anything that pro-lifers and even religious freedom supporters can do about this?
Well, I think it's important for people to understand what's going on here. We have a president who campaigned on reaching across the aisle on unity, who himself was once pro-life and now seems to be, again, responding to some of those pressures from the left. The big money that helped put him in office talks. And so he's backtracking on everything from his former pro-life record to his support for not packing the Supreme Court. Now he's open to those kind of extremist ideas as well. People need to be holding him accountable. Talk to your senators and remind them that we want judges who are going to be faithful to the law and to the Constitution, not who are going to be politicians or even, I would say, just straight up activists now in robes.
We're going to switch gears a little bit. If I can ask you a little bit about the nomination of Vanita Gupta as the Associate Attorney General. Tell us about her and where the nomination process now stands.
Yeah, so she has had her hearing in the Judiciary Committee. She was questioned, and there were some great questions by the Republican senators on that committee about, in particular, some of her previous statements, effectively suggesting that people who were pro-life or pro-religious liberty shouldn't be in office, and some concerns that they had about her attempts to decriminalize all drugs, for example, and some of her opposition to sentences for even white supremacists and domestic terrorists. So this is something that's now moving on to the floor in the House. I think it's going to be an interesting question to watch what Joe Manchin does, particularly, again, at the candidate who has been very much opposed across the board to even making any drugs illegal. She would decriminalize all drugs. This is in a state where the opioid crisis has taken so many thousands of lives, and now there are reports that have come out about the stock that she holds in a company that Bloomberg says is being investigated by Mexico for ties to it's producing an element that's used to make very serious types of heroin, and there's concerns that it's not being done it's being done in a way that facilitates drug cartels getting a hold of it. I think all of those things are questions that they should be asking. Well,
I thank you so much for your insight. Carrie Severino, President of Judicial Crisis Network, thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
North Carolina Senator Thom Tillis will undergo surgery next week for prostate cancer. The Republican pro-life lawmaker made the announcement on Twitter, stating, quote, that his cancer was found early and he expects to make a full recovery. Senator Tillis noted that he had no symptoms. He also said in the tweet, quote, I am blessed that my cancer was detected relatively early, and I can't emphasize enough how important routine screens are regardless of how healthy you think you are. Senator Tillis is 60 years old and just began his second term in the U.S. Senate. Officials in Germany are again suspending the use of the AstraZeneca vaccine for people under the age of 60.
Da wir nicht wissen, was die Empfehlung des Paul-Ehrlich-Institutes sein wird und was
The country's medical regulator said that it had received a total of 31 reports of rare blood clots in recipients. 9 of them died. Officials say the suspension of AstraZeneca for younger people is being done simply as a precaution. Meanwhile, Germany continues to ban anyone from entering the country who hasn't had a negative COVID-19 test in the last 48 hours. The new regulation will be enforced until May 12th. Well, church leaders in Indonesia are speaking out about Sunday's attack on the Catholic cathedral that wounded 20 people. The country's Catholic bishops say that the strike was not just at the church, but the entire country. The statement goes on to say that the attack, quote, degrades human dignity, destroys human values, and adds to the long list of acts of terrorism. Nearly a half a dozen cardinals are calling on the Vatican to overturn restrictions on private masses in St. Peter's Basilica. Earlier today, Cardinal Joseph Zen Bishop Emeritus of Hong Kong published an open letter to Cardinal Robert Sarah saying that he would, quote, fly to Rome and get on his knees and plead with the Holy Father to lift the ban. Welcome back, EWTN News Rome correspondent Colin Flynn. Colin, now can you tell us more about what was written exactly in Cardinal Zen's open letter?
Good evening, Eric. Well, Cardinal Joseph Zen this morning, he released the letter in which he spoke in a very direct and very strong way about his shock and his disagreement at the Vatican's decision to restrict private masses from being said in St. Peter's Basilica. Speaking from Hong Kong, Cardinal Zen said he felt pain and indignation when he heard the news of the restriction and added that if it wasn't for COVID-19, he would, quote, take the first flight to Rome and kneel outside the Pope's residence until the decision was reversed, end quote. Now, this letter was published on his website and addressed to Cardinal Robert Sarah, who is the former prefect of the Vatican's Congregation for Divine Worship. Cardinal Sarah has also spoken out against this new Vatican rule, and he asked the Pope on Monday, yesterday, to reverse the ruling.
Now, Colin, for those not familiar of what it means to have private masses in the Basilica and what this new decree actually states, what are they exactly objecting to?
Well, in St. Peter's Basilica, there are a number of side altars, 45 in total, and 11 chapels. And normally, any priest in good standing from anywhere in the world, perhaps visiting Rome on pilgrimage, they could book one of these small altars and say their private mass on their own, maybe with one or two people, perhaps in a group. And any morning you walk through the Basilica, you would always see these private masses happening on many of the side altars. Well, this new decree, which went into effect on March the 22nd, it basically forbids these small private masses, and instead it states that priests can take part in several concelebrated masses in St. Peter's every day at certain specific times. Now, when the news broke, it was immediately met with backlash from many Catholics who saw this as a suppression of the Mass, including Mass in the extraordinary form. In the decree, the reason given for the decision was that they wanted to ensure, especially coming into Easter, that Masses in St. Peter's Basilica would take place in an atmosphere of recollection and proper liturgical decorum.
And Colin, I understand that Cardinal Zen now is joined with other cardinals who are voicing their opposition.
That's right, Eric. Cardinal Zen and Cardinal Zara, and they now join with a list of cardinals like Cardinal Burke, Muller and Brandmuller, who too have all publicly spoke out against the decision. They are appealing to the Pope and the Vatican to reverse this decision. Eric?
All right. Colin Flynn, EWTN News Rome correspondent, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Eric.
Coming up, Scales of Justice, the legal battle over Masterpiece Cake Shop and gender-specific sports. Welcome back. Local media report lawmakers in New York are considering a bill to allow doctor-assisted suicide. 9 states in the United States allow physician-assisted suicide. And listen to this, folks. The New York bill, A4321, has been referred to the Health Committee in the State House Assembly. The state's Catholic Conference is among the groups fighting the measure. And in Pennsylvania, the state Supreme Court has upheld a ban on state funds being used for abortion. The 7-judge panel voted 6-1. It's the second time the provision has withstood a legal challenge. And in South Dakota, the governor there has effectively vetoed a bill that would have banned transgender identified as males identified as females in sports. Now, supporters say that the measure would have protected female athletes at all levels, and they say to the similar legislation in 3 other states. Now, critics say that the proposal discriminates against the transgender community. Joining us now is Kristen Wagoner, General Counsel for Alliance Defending Freedom. Kristen, thank you so much for joining us again.
Thanks for having me.
Well, tell us more about this proposal and why you support it.
We support the model bills that are being passed around the United States because they're an effort to ensure that women have fair play in sports. They apply at both the collegiate and the high school levels to ensure that girls are not denied scholarships, championships, as well as just an opportunity to play in athletics, because there are no amount of testosterone suppressants that can really overcome the physical advantages that men and boys have over women and girls.
Now, what are the reasons that Governor Noem gave to not support this bill?
She essentially said, well, there were shifting explanations. We started in one place and ended in another. The initial explanation is that it would violate NCAA policy if she did so. But then when it was brought to her attention that actually there is no policy that would preclude this and it's consistent with the NCAA practices, then the explanation shifted to something else. And essentially what it came out to was essentially caving to corporate pressure by the NCAA and Amazon. And unfortunately, Governor Noem also gutted protections for K-12 athletes as well.
And I understand that the governor issued 2 executive orders regarding women's sports. Now, will these help, and do they go far enough?
They do even less than what her original proposal was. It simply admonishes colleges that they should not allow men to compete against women, and it doesn't even provide a remedy for girls in K-12 schools when their rights are violated. So no, it is insufficient, but we do want to praise and commend the governors who've had the courage to stand and to ensure these laws are passed and signed in Arkansas, Mississippi, and Idaho, and there are other states that are considering these proposals right now.
Let's switch gears now quickly. We understand that another lawsuit has been filed against Jack Phillips, the Masterpiece Cake Shop. Now, can you give us any update on that?
I can. We just concluded a trial last week. Essentially, the way this case developed was that on the day Jack's first case was granted by the Supreme Court and the day we found out it would be heard, he was targeted by a transgender attorney. This attorney contacted Jack and requested that a cake be custom designed to celebrate the attorney's gender transition from a man to a woman. Later, the attorney also asked Jack to design a cake that would celebrate and depict Satan smoking a marijuana joint. This attorney then pursued the claim against Jack, and that's the case that went to trial just last week.
Well, Kristen, thank you so much for joining us again. Kristen Waggoner, General Counsel for Alliance Defending Freedom.
Thank you.
Up next, Ultimate Sacrifice. One community gathers to remember a fallen officer. And Holy Week message. Here are the habits that could help you grow in holiness. Our next guest says Holy Week is a great time to begin a journey closer to sainthood, and anyone can do it.
Okay, here's the gut check right here, because if nothing changes, nothing changes. Do you want to be holy? And do you want to be an instrument of renewal in this world? And if so, do you believe it's possible?
Father Mark Mary Ames of the Franciscan Friars of the Renewal has written a new book outlining the small steps the faithful can take to find great holiness. Now, the book is based on 800 years of Franciscan teaching started by its founder, St. Francis of Assisi. And Father Mark Mary Ames joins us now. He's the Director of Communications for the Franciscan Friars of the Renewal and author of the book, Habits for Holiness, Small Steps for Making Big Spiritual Progress. Father, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure to be with you.
Well, I tell you, we all want to be better in life, but what are some practical ways like the layperson like myself can strive to be holier?
That's a great question, and that is the question that the book is trying to answer. And really, I think the foundational principle we want to look at is intentional living. And Habits for Holiness, like you mentioned, it does steal from or build upon 800 years of Franciscan tradition, but also just centuries of the tradition of the faithful, of following Jesus, but doing it intentionally. So, for example, sort of having a prayer plan, having a plan of life for our community when we get together, celebrating Sundays well as a family, living simplicity, working with the poor. All of these habits, these components of the Christian life are going to bear fruit in holiness.
Interesting. And you also talked about family there and talked to me about the importance of family in order to pursue holiness.
100%. Yeah, beautiful. And this is certainly at the heart of the Franciscan charism, right? Saint Francis started following Jesus, and then the Lord sent him brothers, and it was a communal journey. And I like to say that discipleship is a team sport, and that certainly can be within a religious community, within a group at your parish, but the group par excellence who we're journeying with is certainly our family. And so if we as a family can pray together, can share life together, in the midst of this communion, the Lord has great capacity. I think the best soil for receiving and responding to the gospel is the context of family.
And the one thing I like, you mentioned in the book, I mean, we don't think about this, but exercise, proper rest, even healthy eating, good, clean fun are important values to the marathon in life. Can you expand on that for me?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we can speak of this as Franciscan Friars of the Renewal, because I don't think anyone's going to downplay our commitment to the gospel. But we talk about this particularly in our own section of our constitutions about chastity, the importance of exercise, of healthy living. You know, life is difficult and there's a lot of stresses. And in the book we talk about having everyone's going to have baggage, but you want to get it down to a carry-on. And the more effort we spend just being tired or beat up or, you know, from a poor diet, things like this, they're going to bear fruit in our relationships and in our relationship with the Lord. And so a healthy rhythm, good sleep if we can get it, good exercise is a great sort of natural penance way to practice discipline. All of this can help support the natural foundation on which grace can build.
And I understand that you're using this even in your own life. And how have these habits helped you, especially in your work with the disadvantaged in the South Bronx area of New York? That's got to be tough.
You know, it is tough work, but it's also corresponds to the deepest desire of my heart. And so where there is love and there is grace, there's also levity. You know, and Habits for Holiness, it does pull from really our Franciscan way of life and many of our pillars. And part of why I think this is important and fruitful for the laity is, you know, for 800 years, Franciscans have been following Jesus in the midst of a beat up and broken world. And I think many of us look around and do feel like, you know, the world's pretty beat up and we can be kind of tempted to discouragement. But, you know, we've been doing it. If you pray, you live community, you allow the liturgy to inform your life, the beauty of that and the health of that is going to overflow into your community. And for us in a special way, that's our work with the poor, the homeless, those on the street.
And what advice would you have for our viewers during Holy Week?
Oh, take advantage of it. Take advantage of it. You know, I'm seeing like celebration as the work of receiving the gift, but receiving the gift, it takes some work. And so creating space, praying with the scriptures, praying with the liturgy. I think, you know, doing the Stations of the Cross on Good Friday, maintaining a little bit more silence on Holy Saturday, and then celebrating all 8 days of the resurrection, the Easter octave, are all really beautiful ways for us to receive the gift of these holy days.
I tell you what, you just pumped me up spiritually right now. And I tell you, how can the audience get your book? Where do they go?
The best place to go would be ascensionpress.com/holiness.
All right. Well, Father Mark Mary Ames, Director of Communications for the Franciscan Friars of Renewal, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me again.
Thank you. And finally tonight, friends and family of Officer Eric Talley gathered in Denver yesterday to remember a person they say was a hero. The 51-year-old was a devout Catholic. Officer Talley was killed a week ago as the first officer responding to the mass shooting in Boulder. Archbishop Samuel Aquila talked about in his homily how Talley showed what is best about those who serve their communities, adding too often police officers and other community workers are taken for granted. Officer Talley leaves behind a wife and 7 children. Well, we want to thank you so much for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Eric Rosales. Have yourself a wonderful night, and God bless.